When waves of Indo-Iranian speaking peoples migrated into a region they would eventually name after themselves, Iran. Although the modern country of Iran lies at the heart of this region, the Iranian world historically extended far beyond these borders. Long before the arrival of these new groups, however, Iran was already home to highly developed societies with rich artistic traditions. Among the most prominent were the Elamites, who had flourished in southwestern Iran since the 4th millennium BCE. The material culture of the Elamites reveals the earliest traces of some of the most enduring features of Iranian art. One of these features was an interest in depicting composite beings, figures created through the imaginative blending of human and animal forms. These hybrid beings hint at a worldview in which the boundaries between the natural and supernatural were obscure. When the Indo-Iranian speaking groups entered Iran in the 1st millennium BCE, they introduced new elements into this already rich artistic landscape. Over time, these interactions gave rise to something distinct, which we can begin to recognize as ancient Iranian art. This was not a break from the earlier traditions, but a gradual blending of long-lasting local traditions of Iran with those from ancient Mesopotamia. In Western Iran, particularly in the present-day province of Lorestan, a substantial corpus of bronze objects emerges in the early 1st millennium BCE. They reveal a highly developed metalworking tradition. Many of these works take the form of horse harness fittings and cheek pieces, which highlights the importance of the horse in the lives of these largely nomadic communities. As in earlier Elamite art, there remains a strong interest in figures that blur the line between human and animal, especially in depicting heroic or demonic figures. One recurring image is that of the so-called Master of Animals, represented as a powerful hero, triumphant over wild beasts and perhaps echoing the distant memory of an archetypal hero. In northern and northwestern Iran, excavations have discovered cemeteries filled with an abundance of burial goods, among them masterfully worked vessels of silver and gold. These findings are also associated with Iranian groups who migrated to this region. They speak not only to the wealth of these communities, but also reflect a highly developed artistic and also technological tradition. Many of these objects are decorated with intricate figural images that seem to narrate episodes of hunting, battle, or ritual. These themes sometimes merge into a single composition. This is the case, for example, with the famous golden bull of Hassanlu, as you can see on the left side, whose complex imagery brings together deities, heroes, and demonic figures in what appears to be a cosmic battle. Other precious metal vessels from northern Iran show a strong interest in animal imagery, especially animals arranged in procession. A small silver cup at LACMA belongs to this broader group of objects. On its exterior, two men are shown leading mules, while a third mule follows the group on its own, with its lead rope left dangling. These artistic traditions from across the wider Iranian world and beyond come together in the 6th and 5th centuries BCE to create what we know today as ancient Persian art, the art of the Achaemenid Empire. This empire was founded by Cyrus the Great, who was a Persian, an Iranian population that had settled in the south, in a region called Pars, or the modern province of Fars. Under Cyrus and his successors, this small kingdom expanded significantly, becoming one of the largest empires in history, stretching from the Balkans and Egypt in the west to Central Asia and India in the east. Pasargadae, the royal city founded by Cyrus, was laid out as a vast garden with pavilions and palaces set within it. Notably, the garden was sustained by a network of irrigation channels. This layout anticipates the later four-part Persian garden, or charbagh, a form that would spread widely in the Islamic world. The English word paradise ultimately derives from an old Persian term for such gardens. For the Persians, who were early Zoroastrians, these gardens materialize a broader cosmological idea. In their worldview, the universe was moving toward the final triumph of good over evil, when the order of the original creation would be fully restored and when the whole earth would become a paradise. The Achaemenid king imagined himself as playing a central role in bringing about this restoration. Pasargadae, with its carefully ordered layout, could therefore provide a glimpse of that promised future. It suggested that what the world would look like if Persian rule succeeded in extending order across the earth. At the southern edge of the site stands the tomb of Cyrus himself, a simple structure that has acquired renewed political and symbolic importance in modern-day Iran. Over the past decades, this monument has been repeatedly invoked as a symbol of Iranian nationalism. More recently, authorities have even restricted access to the site on special occasions to prevent potential gatherings. Under Darius I, or Darius I, the empire was further consolidated and what we recognize as a fully developed Achaemenid art takes shape. His most ambitious project was Persepolis, or Parse, a vast ceremonial city with multiple palaces that reflect the scale of Darius's imperial ambitions. Construction began around 515 BCE and did not finish until a century later under his successors. At Persepolis, the royal ideology of the Achaemenids finds its strongest expression. Like the garden at Pasargadae, its layout projects an image of a perfectly ordered world, while its extensive visual program conveys an idealized harmony among the subjects of the empire. Persepolis illustrates a key feature of Achaemenid art, a deliberate eclecticism that draws on the arts of earlier periods and of other regions. We can see this artistic eclecticism in the Gate of All Nations, which served as the main entrance to the entire complex. The colossal human-headed bulls that guard the exterior were directly inspired by the Neo-Assyrian lamassus of ancient Mesopotamia, while the building itself draws on earlier Iranian architecture. The Apadana was the principal palace and the main reception hall at Persepolis. Along its stairs runs an elaborate relief program in which Persian nobles are shown leading delegations from across the empire who bring gifts to the Achaemenid king. The figures are sometimes shown holding hands, carrying flowers, or greeting one another, underscoring the diversity of the peoples under Persian rule. The program culminated at the top, where processions from both sides reach the enthroned figure of Darius, who is receiving the delegations with his son, Xerxes, just standing behind him. These reliefs reflect a central idea of Achaemenid royal ideology, that the many peoples of the empire, despite their differences, are all united under an imperial order established by the Persian king. A similar idea appears in a more condensed form at Darius's tomb at Nakhchirestan, a striking cliff face that already possessed religious and symbolic significance even before the Achaemenids. The facade of Darius's rock-cut tomb shows him standing before a fire altar and facing Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of the Zoroastrians, represented here by a figure standing inside a winged disc. Darius stands upon a massive throne borne by 30 figures, each representing a different nation under Persian rule. This is the ultimate display of Darius's power. Former rivals and enemies are now shown working together to uphold the Persian Empire and its king. The portraits of the Persian king were carefully constructed to communicate his exalted position. He is not a god, yet he is physically distinguished from other mortals. Although in his relief at the Apadana he is seated, Darius is clearly taller than those around him. while his long beard further marks his manliness and strength. We find a clearer emphasis on physical strength in the figure of the so-called royal hero, who appears repeatedly in Achaemenid art as a warrior overcoming wild beasts. Mirroring the appearance of the king, he embodies the heroic qualities of the Persian king: calm, immensely powerful, and ever victorious. The power and prestige of the king were also expressed at his royal table. Achaemenid banquets were renowned for their scale and splendor and were reported to host thousands of guests. One of the most important types of vessels used in these settings was the raitan, a drinking vessel consisting of a curved beaker joined to the forepart of a real or fantastic animal. A hole in the animal's chest allowed the liquid content of the vessel to flow into the drinker's mouth. Drinking from such vessels required considerable skill and was meant to challenge the drinker's composure, especially while they were intoxicated. The Achaemenid Empire fell when Alexander the Great defeated Darius III in 331 BCE. Yet Iranian art did not disappear with the fall of the empire. Instead, it entered a new phase, revealing its capacity to retain its fundamental character while absorbing foreign elements, especially those from Greek or Hellenistic traditions. We begin to see these developments in the art of the Parthians, another Iranian group who regained control of much of Iran in the 2nd century BCE. Among the traditions they carried forward was elite banqueting, which found new expressions in the Parthian period. Many of the finest raitans of the ancient world date to the Parthian period. These objects retain the two-part structure of the ancient Persian models, but animals here are more often naturalistic rather than fantastic. For example, this raitan at LACMA ends in the protum of a lively goat with raised forelegs. The naturalistic rendering of the animal, together with the foliate design, points to the strong influences of Hellenistic art. Moreover, the goat was one of the animals associated with Dionysus, the Greek god of wine. In southwestern Iran, in a region that was once the heartland of ancient Elam, the millennia-old tradition of bronze working continued into the Parthian period. A cast bronze statue of a Parthian nobleman, about 2 meters tall, is an illustrative example of this old tradition. The figure was likely not representing a Parthian king, since he does not wear a royal headdress. But a statue of this size and cost must have represented a person of great importance. Although his identity is unknown, he may have been a celebrated hero among Iranians, perhaps a major Parthian commander by the name of Surena, who was remembered for his victories over the Romans. At the beginning of the 3rd century CE, a local ruler in Pars named Ardashir rebelled against the Parthian overlords and soon brought the Iranian world under his control. The new dynasty came to be known as the Sasanian dynasty, named after Ardashir's grandfather Sasan. Like the ancient Achaemenids, Ardashir was also a Persian, and he presented himself as a devout Zoroastrian. The Sasanians deliberately sought to connect themselves to the memory of the ancient Persians. Ardashir claimed descent from the Achaemenids and maintained that the former territories of the ancient Persian Empire were rightfully his. This antiquarianism also shaped Sasanian art. On the reverse of his coins, Ardashir placed a fire altar, an important symbol of Zoroastrianism since the time of the Achaemenids. The Sasanians' engagement with the past can be best witnessed at Nakhsar. As I mentioned earlier, this site was already ancient in the Achaemenid period and remained long afterward a place of continuous significance for successive Iranian dynasties. Its medieval name associates the site with Rostam, the great hero of Iranian epic tradition, who you just heard about from Dr. Komaroff. Here, Ardashir begins the long tradition of Sasanian rock reliefs, created to commemorate important political events and to serve as an instrument for state propaganda. In one of the earliest of these reliefs, we see Ardashir receiving a symbolic ring or a diadem of kingship from Ahura Mazda, the supreme god of Zoroastrians. The image revives an ancient idea that the Persian king's authority is granted by the divine. But it also goes further. For the first time, the god appears in full human form, mirroring the image of the king. Just to make it clear, Ahura Mazda is on the right side of your screen and Ardashir on the left. The visual parallel here is meaningful. It presents the king as the earthly counterpart of the god. In this, the late antique Sasanians consciously returned to an older Persian model of kingship, in which the ruler acts as a carrier of divine will and the restorer of order on earth. Ardashir's son, Shapur I, expanded the empire's territorial reach and continued to develop a visual language that articulated Sasanian royal ideology. Over the course of 3 major campaigns, carried out across roughly 20 years, he seized vast territories from the Roman Empire and commemorated these achievements in several rock reliefs. One of these reliefs, again at Naqsh Rustam, brings the outcome of these campaigns together into a single scene. Shapur appears on horseback, wearing his enormous crown, so large that it breaks the frame of the relief. Before him kneels the Emperor Philip, shown here begging for mercy, while Shapur holds the hand of Valerian, another Roman emperor he, in fact, captured in the year 260. Behind Shapur stands his high priest Curator. His presence signals the religious subtext of Ardashir's victories. Like his committed predecessors 8 centuries earlier, the king's victory is presented not only as a major political achievement, but also as the fulfillment of divine duty. The Sasanian king also drew on the heroic traits of ancient Persian rulers. This appeared most visibly in the hunting plates, an important group of expertly manufactured silver vessels likely presented as gifts to foreign dignitaries. On these objects, Sasanian kings were shown in their elaborate regalia, pursuing wild animals, sometimes shooting at them, sometimes confronting them at close range. The image of the royal hunter reflects an ancient Iranian ideal of kingship, that of a powerful and victorious ruler who is fully prepared to single-handedly defend his realm and bring order to the world. Repeated across millennia in different forms, these images gradually lose their connection to specific individuals, as each new iteration assumes the same role and merges into the same timeless figure, that of the Iranian royal hero. In considering the art of ancient Iran, one major category of material culture is tied to feasting and banqueting. Gatherings centered on the consumption of wine formed an important part of aristocratic life and gave rise to a rich array of luxury objects. This tradition reached a high point in the Sasanian period, when courtly banquets made use of a wide range of precious tableware. What is especially noteworthy is that these objects continued to be made after the fall of the Sasanian Empire at the hands of the Muslim Arabs in the mid-7th century. Their survival shows that the Islamic conquest did not present a sudden rupture in Iranian art and culture. Many traditions with ancient roots endured, and elite circles of the early Islamic period showed a renewed interest in engaging with the visual and material culture of pre-Islamic Iran. This is where I stop and leave it to Dr. Komaroff to continue the story of Iranian art in the Islamic period and into the contemporary era.
Okay. I know, I don't need it, thanks. Okay, so now, how do I turn this back on?
Oh,
thank you. Okay, I'm back. And it's fine if you just see the top of my head. Okay, as you just heard from Dr. Maghsoudlou, there's not an evident rupture that occurs between the pre-Islamic and Islamic era, at least in visual culture. So although the Islamic era begins in the year 622 CE in the Arabian Peninsula, and the Arab Muslim conquest of the Persian Empire can be dated from 633 to 651, it's difficult to pinpoint a precise moment for the transition from late antique to Islamic art. Indeed, the evidence suggests Indeed, the evidence suggests continuity rather than rupture in terms of visual culture. We can especially see this in imagery related to the king and kingship. Sasanian coins typically show a bust of the king with his distinctive crown, as here on the left. The nearly identical coin at right, however, was struck in the Islamic era. The Arabic text to the right of the bust indicates that it was minted in Basra, in Iraq, in the name of the Arab governor Ubaidullah bin Zayed. Inscribed just outside the margin is Bismillah, in the name of God, further attesting that the coin dates to the Islamic era. Such coins would have kept the image of Persian kingship in public view. Similarly, mold-made stucco plaques, such as the one at the left in LACMA's collection, likely from a palace in Ashgabat dating to the late 7th or early 8th century, repeats the image of the king here hunting, again wearing his distinctive crown. Also from the same site are plaques as at right, depicting the ancient Persian king Bahram Gur, still a prince, hunting with his female companion Azadeh, immortalized several centuries later in the Shahnameh, but already known and rendered in visual form in Sasanian art, along with imagery of the king hunting. Completed in the early 11th century, there are no surviving manuscripts of the Shahnameh until the 13th century, and illustrated versions are preserved only from the 14th century, although we find scenes depicted earlier in other media, such as ceramics. And this is, again, Bahram Gur and Azadeh, and it's a long, long story that's kind of misogynistic, so you'll have to look it up yourself. The connection between kingship past and present manifests most significantly in illustrated versions of the Shahnameh or Book of Kings. From the first such royally commissioned manuscripts belonging to the period of Mongol rule in Iran, 1256 to 1353, the ancient kings and heroes of the epic poem were recast as contemporary Muslim rulers. The visual identification between the sovereign, often himself not a Persian, as here, and earlier Iranian kings was deliberate and significant, used to validate the ruling elite. This type of politically motivated patronage helped ensure the cultural and aesthetic importance of the Book of Kings up to the early modern era. Its kings and heroes are embedded still in Iranian culture. Here in illustrations from a dispersed manuscript known as the Great Mongol Shahnameh, probably made for the Sultan Abu Sa'id, the artists depicted the facial types, hairstyle, costumes, and architecture associated with the Mongol ruling elite, which are reflected in other media. So you can see here, Bahram Gur is dressed in a silk textile that's very similar to the one on the left, which is Chinese and just slightly earlier. Or here you can see the necklace being presented on the right-hand side in the painting. Looks very similar to one of a similar date in the Metropolitan Museum. It is from this period that we have not only preserved illustrated manuscripts, but information on their production. Illustrated manuscripts like the Shahnameh were the result of a collaborative effort, one that required wealthy, generally royal patrons who could afford the costly materials and large staff required. Such books were produced in the Kitabkhane, literally book house, an atelier combining the functions of a scriptorium, workshop, and library. Divided into 50 sections, each devoted to a particular king, the Shahnameh allowed for a wide variety of possible illustrations. In the 15th century, during the reign of the Timurid dynasty, which originated in Central Asia, multiple Persian manuscripts were commissioned and illustrated at their courts, including the Shahnameh, as here, an intact manuscript made for the Timurid prince Muhammad Juki. Although some have suggested the royal figure at right under the orange parasol as a portrait of the prince, more likely it is a generic rendering of a member of the Timurid elite, as similar depictions of full-faced and mustachioed men occur in illustrated manuscripts for other Timurids. including for Muhammad Juki's brother by Sangur. However, the artist did manage to insert Muhammad Juki into the Shahnameh, as in this scene in which the Iranian hero Rustam slays the Turanian champion Esfandiar. The inscription on the battle standard in the upper left, which you can also see on the right, reads, "The mighty Sultan, Muhammad Juki." From the 16th century, we have the most extensively illustrated manuscript of the Shahnameh, with 258 paintings made for the Safavid Shah Tahmasp. The manuscript is notorious for having been broken up in the 1970s, with its illustrations now scattered among many collections, and with 118 illustrations and the entire text in the Museum of Modern Art in Tehran, for which it was exchanged in 1994 in a complicated deal for a de Kooning painting plus $20 million. For those of you paying attention to costumes and physiognomy, you will have noticed changes here between the earlier Timurid paintings and these 16th century examples. One giveaway is the headdress introduced at the Safavid court, consisting of a cap with a tall, often red projection wrapped in a white turban around its base and perhaps most easily visible in the slide at the left. Any of you skeptically thinking that maybe they never considered the historicism of the costumes worn by the protagonists in the epic poem, in at least one instance, they did, because it was specifically signaled by the text itself. The painting at left from the story of the first king, Geomars, illustrates a time when humans lived in mountain caves and wore the skins of leopards, as depicted here. All other paintings clearly take place in what was then the present day, as in the depiction of the king Jamshid, who introduced technology and arts to humanity. And again, this is clearly taking place at the Safavid court. Manuscripts such as this, which equated the contemporary ruler with the long tradition of Persian kingship and asserted his legitimacy to rule, were not intended to impress the Shah's subjects, but rather his princely peers, including rivals, both within and outside Iran. Indeed, this Shahnameh was sent as an accession gift from Shah Tahmasp to the Ottoman Sultan Selim in 1567, as depicted here. It was among a group of, quote, rare and propitious gifts, close quote, carried by 34 heavily laden camels. This ends our discussion of historical manuscripts of the Shahnameh, which continued to be produced less and less frequently. Instead, I would like to briefly turn to the last great royally sponsored manuscript, a 6-volume Persian language edition of 1001 Nights, made between 1852 and 1859. As a reminder, the historical framing device of the 1001 Nights is the Abbasid court at Baghdad under the Caliph Harun al-Rashid, 786 to 809. The present manuscript was made for the ruler Nasr ad-Din Shah, who reigned 1848 to 96 of the Qajar dynasty, which was 1785 to 1925, a period which represents a true juncture between historical and modern Iran. The hundreds of manuscript illustrations were painted by or under the supervision of the court artist Sani al-Mulk, who had studied in Europe. Western-style naturalism permeates the landscapes, and most of the interiors are based on single-point perspective, rather than the multiple vantage points of classical Persian painting. But in keeping with the tradition of earlier manuscript illustration, these 19th century paintings are unconcerned with historicism in terms of the characters and setting. Rather, they provide a detailed rendition of contemporary Qajar court life, as substantiated by contemporaneous photographs, including those made by Nasr ad-Din Shah, who learned photography while still a crown prince. Here we can compare the Thousand and Nights painting with a portrait of the young ruler and a somewhat later photograph. So I'm talking about in the manuscript illustration, the figure on the far right. This illustration depicts the ruler Harun al-Rashid with his vizier, according to the caption and text on the reverse. Clearly, the artist has portrayed the famed caliph as the Shah. Given the global settings of the 1001 Nights, including Persia, India, and China, the specifically Qajar context of the paintings universalizes Nasr ad-Din's court in an intentionally flattering manner, in much the same way that the earlier royally sponsored manuscripts of the Shahnameh enshrined their patrons within the history of Persian kingship. As already noted, historical manuscripts were costly enterprises produced chiefly under royal patronage. Even in the 19th century, when portraits of the kings, leading courtiers, and other members of the elite had already supplanted commissions for manuscript illustrations, artists were still largely dependent on patrons for their work. But if we leap into the second half of the 20th century, though artists continued to mingle past and present, it was for a different purpose and a more expansive audience. Rather than portraying the past in contemporary terms, they instead chose to disguise the present within the past. Indeed, in the 1970s, artists looked to the past to create a visual commentary on the reigning Pahlavi dynasty, from 1925 to 1979. They did not delve deeply into the past, but turned to the preceding Qajar dynasty, for which the remnants of visual culture would still have been accessible. Popular culture, such as the 1974 film classic Shahzadeh Ehtijab or Prince Ehtijab, directed by Bahman Farman Ara, from Hussein Gulshari's acclaimed novel, also may have played a role in disseminating Qajar imagery. Like the book, the film focuses on a Qajar prince and is nominally set in the mid-1920s, but is equally suggestive of contemporary Pahlavi-era Iran. Set in the prince's dilapidated palace, photographs made from actual glass plate negatives of Qajar royalty, and you can see them in the still on the right on the mantle, were used to give the settings an authentic ambiance. This gesture may have helped to introduce Qajar photography as something artistically valid and potentially inspirational, rather than purely documentary, as we shall see. Qajar photographs played a key role in a unique group of photographs produced in 1976 by Kaveh Golestan, better known as a photojournalist, who for the sake of this series combined a Polaroid camera with an SLR lens. These images were shot on Polaroid film by moving collage fragments in front of an open shutter. The collages create potent visions of reptile-headed kings and leonine army officers, referencing both the 1970s and the Qajar era. The artist Ardashir Mohassas was modern Iran's most influential social satirist. His fearless critiques of both the monarchy and the clergy led to increasing censorship and police harassment, prompting his departure from Iran in 1976. Subsequently settling in New York, he closely followed events leading up to the 1979 Islamic Revolution and its aftermath, as in his pointedly observed series Life in Iran. Many of these drawings refer to and reflect incidents that took place in the time leading up to and during the 1979 revolution, but are set in the late Qajar period, as the very specific costumes and headdresses demonstrate. Mohassas had made use of Qajar imagery even before he left Iran. Such earlier works as here, rendered in thick, dark ink, are reminiscent of 19th century lithographs and photographs. Here, we'll make a very quick autobiographical detour to explain how I came to understand better the smoothly rendered anachronisms of 21st century Iranian art. In spring 2014, I saw this billboard, obviously talking about the left-hand side, on the side of a building at Valiasar Square, one of Tehran's busiest intersections. As you can see, it depicts then-President Barack Obama standing beside a menacing-looking man clad in armor over a red robe and a helmet festooned with red feathers. The billboard had been up for well over a year, hence it's fading. As you can see there, the image on the right-hand side is from the original artwork. As I later understood, the towering image appropriated and contextualized a key event from the early history of the Shiite branch of Islam, the majority faith of Iran. It references an event in 680 when the villainous Shem offered shelter to and then murdered the Imam Hussein and his family at Karbala. Meant to convey a contemporary political message, it subtly linked Obama with Shem's duplicity. Shem's costume is not that of the late 7th century, but rather comes from the domain of Tazieh, a Shiite passion play in which costume performers reenact the events at Karbala. Imitating a BBC Chiron announcing breaking news, the text here repeats the phrase, "Join us to be safe," also a play on Obama's name in Persian. What struck me most about the image from the time I saw it, even until now, is the assured and authentic manner in which the anachronistic pair of figures exist in the shared space. Using collage, Ramin Harirzadeh creates works, as here, that reclaim and transform found images into cleverly unsettling and ambiguous scenes. In this work, the artist juxtaposes the now iconic Iranian newspaper headline, see it, lower right, from January 16, 1979, that announces the Shah's departure, with the headline declaring Ayatollah Khomeini's arrival 2 weeks later. Covered with a black chador, the artist ironically inserts himself into the scene, kneeling before the king, whose head has been replaced by a character from a well-known 1967 allegorical satire by Bijan Mofid. The mixing of the headlines and the title, He Came, He Left, He Left, He Came, suggests that the artist, a longtime resident of Dubai, that for the artist, a longtime resident of Dubai, there was perhaps no difference between the leaders. In his ingenious series, Rustam II, the artist Siamak Falizadeh transports the mythical hero of the Shahnameh, Rustam, into the context of the present, and these are digital prints on canvas. At the top center, he rides a souped-up hybrid vehicle, half horse, half motorcycle. He performs his deeds of valor against the backdrop of modern-day Tehran, which is obvious in the far left. You can see the Shayad, or Memorial to the King, or known today as the Azadeh or Freedom Tower. He wears a Rolex watch and Dolce & Gabbana belt, and in fact, all of his consumer goods are listed in the text block at the lower right. At the far left, you see his grandfather Sam, portrayed as a Qajar general. The bottom, his father Zal, is a long-haired redneck who has a winged truck. In what is the most poignant scene in this 50,000 plus couplet text, you have the death of Sohrab at the hands of his father, Rustam. Just as Rustam deals the fatal blow, he notices that his son is wearing a memento he had given to his mother, so he might recognize him. So just as his son is dying, Rustam recognizes that this is his son, Sohrab. Whereas here, everything is perhaps blamed on the crushed can of Red Bull in Sohrab's left hand, which is perhaps what led to his defeat. On the right-hand side is just a standard book painting of this same scene, which, as you can see, is a bit more poignant. The story doesn't end here, at least in this modern-day retelling of the tale. Rather, Spider-Man makes an appearance because he happens to be Sohrab's best friend, and he's seeking revengeance, but he also is slain by Rustam. In this series, Rustam II appears as the new champion of the Iranian state, based on a new version of the Book of Kings. And for those who do not accept this new mythology, the message is clear. We can destroy you, your heroes, and even your children. Equally dark is Falizadeh's 2014 print series, Underground. It takes as its theme the long reign of Nasr ad-Din Shah, who was assassinated in 1896, just short of his 50th jubilee. In Falizadeh's retelling of the tale, Nasr ad-Din rules an underground city for 50-year intervals, dies, is resurrected, and governs again, but exactly as before. While the narrative is ostensibly set in the past, its sighting and meaning reference present-day Iran. At the left is an accession scene, which is envisioned like a rock concert in which Nasr ad-Din Shah sits on a fanciful throne, wearing a recreation of the famous Khianid crown, a 24-pound jewel-encrusted creation recreated by the artist, and you can see the artist wearing it at the right. The image introduces the cast of characters, including Nasr ad-Din's future assassin, Mirza Reza, who's in the lower left. The series juxtaposes the suffering of the Iranian people, such as a scene of bread riots at the left, with the Shah's lavish lifestyle in the center, where he's doing a Michael Jackson moon dance with his family just returning from a shopping trip to Europe, and it also shows his megalomania, as on the right. On the other hand, his assassin is a bit more sympathetically portrayed. Mirza Reza on the left is shown in the guise of Travis Bickle from The Taxi Driver, which happens to be the movie that's playing at the cinema. And you can see in the assassination scene on the right that the artist was familiar with such other American films as The Matrix. Mirza Reza's execution is rendered like a grand Baroque altarpiece, and right on schedule at the right, Nasr ad-Din Shah is resurrected again. The takeaway, perhaps, is that whether kings or clerics, Iran has been subjected to generations of unfortunate leadership. As has often been noted in classical Persian painting, it is always a perfect day. In his disquieting work, idyllic life, New York-based Shoja Azari builds on and plays against this precious art form. His starting point is a projected image of a vastly magnified 16th century manuscript page, which you can see on the left, depicting an Arcadian setting of a princely palace and surrounding town. The pleasant setting is interrupted by the sound of a trapped bird, as the video devolves into a series of clips taken from YouTube and inserted into the projected painting, disrupting the idyllic scene with disturbing and sometimes violent vignettes drawn from contemporary Iranian life. In the last clip, we see that through the viewfinder of a high-power rifle, a bird, and the bird is fired upon. And I have watched this many times and have always thought the bird was not mortally wounded, but rather flew safely away. When I mentioned this to the artist, Shoja just shrugged and said, maybe. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Linda and Arvin, for an excellent presentation. We have about 10 minutes remaining. Yeah, thanks for the round of applause from the audience. Virtual round of applause. So we have about 10 minutes remaining for questions. So does anyone go ahead and have a question? So while we're up, there we have Cecilia. Go ahead, Cecilia.
Hello. I was just wondering if, because, from what you've described, there is this kind of relational situation between, the ancient past and, the present. In the current situation in Iran, do you know of any artists that are working, responding, like, to what's happening and sort of also, doing it in this way that it interlays this, historical with the contemporary in terms of these kind of unfortunate situations of leadership and history and violence?
Well, I haven't seen any brand new work that's come out of Iran because that's a bit difficult, but I would assume that when things hopefully change a little bit and settle down, that we will see related work. But to me, the thing that's sad and is always evident, you could, for instance, take some of the drawings that were done by Ardashir Mohassas, and they're just as timely now as they were in the 1970s. And although the works by Siamak Falizadeh are from 10 or 15 years ago, they're also just as relevant to today. I think sometimes the specific details change, but the emphasis on using the past to express the present doesn't change.
Are there any other questions? I have while we're waiting for perhaps more people to think of questions, I have a question just about the, LACMA and its collecting policy to have both historic Islamic art and contemporary Middle Eastern art in the collection, and just how you think that helps to shape public understanding of the culture. So I guess that's a question for both Linda and Arvin, I suppose.
Okay, well, I could turn over to Arvin if you'd like to, but first I just want to say that I made a very specific decision to collect contemporary art because I had always hoped through the historical collection that our visitors might be able to make a connection between the historical lands and the present day. But it occurred to me it would be much easier if they could make that connection by seeing contemporary art from the region. And so there is a much stronger connection when they can see something that's contemporary. And I noticed from the first time I hung a single contemporary work amidst the Islamic collection that visitors who were younger made a beeline towards it without necessarily knowing that it was contemporary, but it was something that they can relate to. Because I believe an important part of what we do is not only to engage our audiences with art, but with other ideas about different cultures, different places, different peoples, with the aim of creating better understanding. And so I think that one can do it certainly with historical art, but it becomes much easier to do it with contemporary art.
Okay.
Arvin, did you want to? Yeah, go ahead.
It's been less than a year that I've been here, but I can say that this is a very unique collection, especially for someone who wants to represent or study Iranian art, both from the earliest periods to the contemporary. I haven't seen any collection like this with this kind of very with this strength in all of these periods. I know that the ancient collection here has been somehow has been understudied, but it's very strong, as you could probably see in some of the slides that I had. I brought some examples from LACMA collection, and that shows that kind of strength and depth of this collection. So it's very unique for whoever wants to study these kind of long-term dynamics and interactions in Iranian art. This is a very unique place to do so.
Excellent.
Okay, I'm back. You can see how well we get along. It's no problem sharing a camera.
And probably sit here. So yeah.
I think there's another question from Cecilia.
Hi again. I was just, I saw the exhibition you curated, Linda, about women artists from the Middle East. And I'm always interested, when we talk about a country or the, art historical heritage of a country, I didn't see many women today. I mean, talking about the contemporary times, are they not speaking to this idea of this kind of dialectics of past and present in a sort of a critical way to those political regimes? Is it separate from, because I always think of, the politics of gender as being completely intertwined with the politics of government and everything, in terms of especially thinking of the repression of women today. So I would like to, and also you being, you collected in a very strategic way women artists. I would like to, hear a little bit from you about their role in this sort of historiography.
Okay, so you're talking about women artists, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so for the theme that we wanted to share, which would emphasize kingship, it's less of a theme that appeals, I think, to or that in our collection anyway, in my experience, appeals to women artists. Although there's an artist, and I'm not going to think of her name, in San Francisco, who did a wonderful work we included in a show in which she turned a Qajar king into a Qajar queen, and that happens sometimes. I think for the women artists whose work I focused on, they're just as engaged in politics and social commentary. They go about doing it in a different way, I would say. You have someone like now I'm not going to think. Anyway, you have artists that might decide to emphasize, and many of them do, restrictions on how women appear in public, covered or uncovered. There's a wonderful series that we have, and I'm drawing a blank on the artist's name, which she photographed her niece before the mandatory age, around 9, when she had to cover in school, and then after. And it portrays a girl who's still a girl playing with a doll beforehand, and then afterwards she's just standing in her school uniform, covered up with her arms folded, like she's mad. And so artists have done this, or women artists, as I said, express things a bit differently. Sometimes it's about their own bodies. Sometimes it's about, as in some of Shireen Nishat's work and some of her videos, being driven mad by living in Iran. And then, of course, we have Shireen Nishat's Women of Allah series, which to me kind of suggests the kind of ambiguity one can have, where you could be horrified by something and you could also be enraptured by it, which I think is what she did in that series, although she's changed her interpretation of it over time, whereas the first time she saw these women who were the female equivalent of the pastaran in Iran who were out in public, covered but armed, it was a kind of thrilling thing to see a woman that powerful, and yet it was repulsive as well. And so, I mean, there's certainly a lot going on with women artists as well. I think they just express it in a different manner, and it's also a much more personal form of expression than in the work that I showed.
Okay. I think that we should probably close the conversation. There's only a minute remaining. So I want to thank all of you for being present today. I do just want to quickly share my screen and remind everybody that there is two more talks coming up for navigating change in the museum. The next talk is going to be, I'll just zoom in here so everybody can see. The next one is Dare Turner on April the 15th, which is in 2 weeks' time. And then the last talk for the spring semester is Anthony Kendall on Zoom on April 23. And he's the director of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Colorado, in Denver. And Derek Turner is the curator of Indigenous art at the Brooklyn Museum. So I look forward to seeing you all there. And thanks so much, Linda and Arvin, for your wonderful contribution today. And if we could all show our appreciation once again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Bye.